A cold wind cut across the Black Sea as night swallowed the horizon, but one thing still pierced the darkness: the unmistakable glare of a Ukrainian MiG-29 climbing through the frigid air. What happened next would send a shockwave across the entire region, because the Russian ship watching from below believed it had found the perfect target. Instead, that decision turned into a colossal mistake. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Conflict Front Stories channel. Please subscribe and like my videos. Tonight, we break down one of the most unexpected exchanges of the Ukraine war, an encounter that started with confidence and ended in disaster. The story begins far from the coast, at an airbase where Ukrainian mechanics worked silently around the MiG-29, tightening bolts, adjusting wing panels, and checking the radar suite. Exterior lights blazed across the tarmac as engineers moved like shadows around the fighter jet, preparing it for a mission that would push it deep toward the Black Sea. The pilot walked toward the aircraft with a slow, steady stride, a small crew following behind him. He carried the knowledge that this mission was dangerous, but also understood the air-to-sea capability the MiG-29 now carried after months of upgrades. Inside the cockpit, the pilot lowered himself into the seat and made quick checks. Interior lights glowed across the console, reflecting off his visor. The engine ignition sequence began with a deep rumble that became a violent roar. The MiG-29 surged forward, leaving the ground in a stream of white vapor as the night swallowed it whole. Out over the Black Sea, the Russian ship cruised at a slow, purposeful pace. It was a patrol vessel equipped with radar, anti-aircraft missiles, and a crew that felt confident in their detection systems. The captain scanned the screens with narrowed eyes while operators monitored the radar sweeps with rhythmic beeps echoing across the bridge. They spotted something: altitude climbing, speed increasing, trajectory approaching their sector. They believed they had the advantage. The Ukrainian pilot soared through the clouds, staying just above the radar horizon. Exterior flashes of moonlight flickered across the jet's wings as he locked onto mission parameters. The communication system crackled with confirmation from his command center. The interior of the cockpit remained silent except for the hum of electronics and the steady breathing in his mask. The Russian ship's operators grew tense as the unknown signal approached. They initiated tracking mode, preparing missiles on standby. Their confidence grew. They had intercepted aircraft in this region before. The captain believed this would be another easy interception and possibly a major propaganda victory. What they didn't know was that the MiG-29 was not flying blindly. It had a plan. The Ukrainian pilot descended sharply, cutting into a pocket of low fog above the water. Exterior waves crashed beneath him, illuminated by flashes of lightning in the distance. He had trained for these conditions. His interior cockpit alarm beeped, showing the Russian ship had locked radar onto him. Instead of fleeing, he smiled, gripping the throttle tighter. On the Russian ship, alarms blared as the radar image shifted unpredictably. The MiG-29 was not climbing or approaching in a straight line. It was maneuvering aggressively, slicing across radar signatures and forcing the operators to readjust constantly. The ship launched a warning flare into the dark sky, an attempt to intimidate the fighter jet. The captain ordered his missile crews to prepare for launch. The Ukrainian pilot saw the flare burst across the night. He steadied his breathing and brought the aircraft lower until the waves nearly touched the landing gear. The glowing lights from the Russian ship appeared on the horizon. Exterior darkness wrapped around everything except those dim shapes. He activated his targeting system, scanning the vessel from a distance. His upgraded MiG-29 had new anti-ship capabilities improvised from months of battlefield innovation. Inside the Russian ship, the captain barked commands as crew members rushed between consoles. Their screens lit up with warnings. The MiG-29 was now flying too low for their main radar arrays. The ship tried switching to infrared tracking. A young operator wiped sweat from his forehead, trying to maintain lock. Every second of lost signal made the captain more anxious. He had underestimated this aircraft. The Ukrainian pilot soared upward for only 2 seconds, just enough to appear on radar, baiting the ship into thinking he was going for a retreat or a climb. The exterior sky lit up as the Russian ship fired a missile. It streaked upward with a flaming tail, cutting the darkness apart. Interior alarms pulsed in the MiG-29 cockpit. The pilot rolled instantly, dropping altitude again, letting the missile overshoot by a narrow margin. He felt the shock wave of its detonation even through the reinforced hull. The Russian crew erupted in cheers, believing they had hit him. But their celebration ended when radar showed another spike, one that indicated the MiG-29 was still intact and closing in fast. The captain froze. His mistake now became clear. He had fired too early, wasting the element of surprise, and exposing the ship's full position. Exterior seawater sprayed upward as the MiG-29 approached firing range. The Ukrainian pilot flipped open the trigger guard and centered the targeting reticle on the Russian ship. This was no ordinary flyover. The aircraft carried precision munitions modified for low-altitude maritime operations. Interior vibrations shook the pilot's seat as he released the first weapon. It streaked down toward the vessel with laser-guided accuracy. On the Russian ship, the alarm turned into a full siren. The captain yelled orders, but the crew scrambled helplessly. The first explosion ripped across the starboard deck, sending debris into the air. The ship rocked violently. The pilot circled around. Exterior flames sparked across the ship's surface as sailors rushed to contain the damage. The second strike hit near the communications tower, disabling their primary systems. The ship began losing orientation, slowly tilting as smoke poured from the interior compartments. Radios went dead. Screens flickered. The Russian captain looked out the window at the burning deck and realized they had made a catastrophic miscalculation. The MiG-29 pulled back for one final attack run. The pilot remained calm, his interior cockpit illuminated only by a soft green glow. He aligned the crosshairs one more time. The Russian crew braced for impact. The final blast struck near the ammunition storage section, triggering secondary detonations that shook the entire vessel. Flames engulfed the ship's rear section as sailors abandoned their posts. Smoke spiraled into the sky like a dark beacon. The MiG-29 flew overhead, roaring past the crippled vessel. Exterior flames reflected off the water as the pilot turned toward home, mission complete. He sent a coded message confirming the hit, and received a simple reply, operation successful. Return safely. Inside the damaged Russian ship, chaos consumed the lower decks. Water flooded through the ruptured hull. Officers shouted evacuation orders in the dim emergency lighting. Some compartments were sealed off entirely as the crew fought to stabilize the vessel, but the damage was too severe. The ship had lost power, lost radar, lost communications, and lost its structural stability. What had begun as a confident engagement had become one of the most embarrassing defeats for the Russian fleet. The Ukrainian pilot ascended through the clouds, heading back to base. His cockpit felt calm again, quiet except for the hum of the engines. He reviewed the mission data recorded on the onboard system, confirming every strike with precision. Exterior dawn light began breaking across the horizon as he approached friendly territory. Back at the airbase, ground crews watched the MiG-29 descend. Dust swirled across the runway as the plane touched down smoothly. Mechanics rushed forward, guiding it to a stop. The pilot climbed out, removing his helmet with a quiet sigh of relief. Officers approached, shaking his hand and reviewing preliminary footage captured by the aircraft's targeting camera. Inside the briefing room, the pilot sat at the table while commanders analyzed the mission recordings. The interior space was dim, lit only by projector light. They replayed the moment the Russian ship launched its missile. They paused during the near miss, discussing how the pilot's maneuver saved his life. They studied the strike patterns, noting how each hit disabled a critical part of the vessel. The pilot listened quietly, nodding occasionally. Outside, the damaged Russian ship continued drifting in the Black Sea. Emergency signals were eventually picked up by nearby units, but the vessel's condition was beyond salvage. Tugboats attempted to stabilize the hull, but cracks widened with every wave. Smoke continued to billow from the deck, visible for miles. Analysts monitoring the scene reported severe structural failure. The news spread quickly. Military channels buzzed with the implications. A single Ukrainian MiG-29, upgraded with improvised but effective systems, had just neutralized a Russian ship that had all the advantages: radar, missiles, and naval support. But overconfidence had changed everything. Russian media attempted to downplay the event, while independent observers described it as one of the most humiliating exchanges of the conflict. The Ukrainian Air Force released only a short statement, praising the bravery and precision of its pilots. International analysts began discussing the evolving tactics of the war, noting how air-to-sea engagements were becoming more frequent. The MiG-29's successful operation demonstrated how older Soviet aircraft, when modernized, could still dominate against more sophisticated systems. In civilian cities far from the front, people watching the news saw another reminder of how unpredictable the conflict had become. One moment of miscalculation could transform a routine patrol into a devastating loss. The Black Sea had become a contested zone where every movement carried risk, and where Ukrainian pilots increasingly demonstrated bold, innovative strategies. The Russian fleet was forced to reconsider its patrol routes. Commanders ordered ships to stay farther from contested airspace and to upgrade their detection systems to handle low-altitude threats. But the reputational damage was already done. The sinking of a patrol vessel by a single MiG-29 raised serious questions within internal military circles. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian pilot returned to his quarters. The interior room was quiet, a small space with a desk, a bed, and a dim lamp. He removed his flight suit and sat on the edge of the bed, reflecting on the mission. He knew he had made history, though he also knew the war was far from over. But for that night, he allowed himself a moment of calm. Outside the base, floodlights lit the runway. Mechanics continued working into the early morning hours, preparing aircraft for the next operations. The MiG-29 involved in the mission stood silently, still warm from the flight. Its exterior panels glowed faintly under the hangar lights, a symbol of how innovation and courage continued to shape the conflict. As the sun finally rose, a new day began across the region. But the story of the Russian ship's mistaken attack circulated everywhere, from military briefings to global news channels, from strategy discussions to social media clips. People replayed footage, analyzed radar maps, and debated what had really happened out there on the dark waters of the Black Sea. The truth remained simple. A Russian ship tried to hunt down a Ukrainian MiG-29. It believed it held the advantage. It believed it controlled the engagement. It believed it could intimidate, threaten, and destroy the aircraft with ease. But it misjudged the skill, preparation, and upgraded capabilities of the Ukrainian pilot. And in that miscalculation, in those few minutes of arrogance, the Russian crew sealed their own fate. The pilot walked outside later that morning, watching other jets take off into the golden sky. The war continued, with new missions and new risks. But the echoes of last night's battle remained vivid. A reminder that in war, technology matters, strategy matters, but the courage of individuals can shift the balance in ways no one expects. And so the story of how a Russian ship attacked a Ukrainian MiG-29, and made a massive mistake, became another chapter in the unfolding conflict. A chapter written in the roaring engines of a fighter jet, the blinding explosion across the Black Sea, and the quiet determination of those who refused to yield.